It's an extreme escalatory phase, 3.5 plus years in. As you know, Trump says he's strongly considering giving them long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles. And Russia has said that that escalates into direct war, and they're basically calling it World War IV. The CIA called the Cold War World War III, so we are really in with all the ingredients we have with China, the North Korean troops being in Ukraine, all the different proxy countries involved. This really is a new world war. The only question is, will it continue to escalate?
It isn't every day where I can say that I agree with Alex Jones, but what you just heard him say in regard to the escalatory measures that the Trump administration is engaging in and considering doing more of is true, and we should be worried about it. Now, two things can be true at the same time. Trump can be pursuing escalation, which is not good. At the same time, Russia has rejected efforts to take a seat at the table and in good faith negotiate an end to this war. Now, Tucker Carlson agreed with Alex Jones's take on the Tomahawk missiles. These are long-range missiles, while making it very clear that he does not like Volodymyr Zelensky at all. I think that's been clear since the almost beginning of this Russian invasion into Ukraine. Trump, on the other hand, has pulled, I think it's safe to say, a complete 180 on Zelensky and has been very supportive of the Ukrainian president while also being critical of Putin. So we'll get to more on that later, but first, here's more from the discussion that Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones had.
Why would the US government continue to recognize Zelensky, who's an unelected dictator who's worked for years to destroy Christianity in Ukraine, which is a Christian country and has always been? Why would he be invited to the White House this week? I don't understand. He does not have a Democratic mandate. He's not an elected leader. He's a murderer. They've sold our weapons to some of the worst terror groups in the world. And we're treating him like he's a head of state. Like, why are we doing that?
And just a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, he was back at the White House, and Trump then posted Truth Social. And I love Trump overall, but Trump started doing a 180 from saying we need to get out of this to saying, well, we're out of it, but we'll sell whatever weapons to Europe you want. And I feel like Ukraine's going to win and maybe not just get back its territory, but get more territory, meaning Russia, which is an extremely provocative and escalatory statement to Russia.
So I wanted to fact check one thing that Tucker Carlson said, because I didn't know if Ukraine is a Christian nation, but it turns out, yes, 72% of the population identified as Orthodox, identified with the Orthodox Church, but whatever, that's an irrelevant point to this conversation. Everything else they said, I think, is interesting and worthy of a discussion. What do you make of it, Cenk? Because I honestly largely agree. Look, at the end of the day, Russia's a nuclear power, and you don't want the United States in a direct war with Russia, but we're certainly getting closer to that, especially as US military intelligence is going to be shared with Ukraine to do military operations on Russian soil, specifically to target their energy infrastructure. I think that's already entering incredibly dangerous territory. But what do you make of it?
Yeah, so this one's super complicated. So I'm not sure I'm in favor of sending the Tomahawk missiles, and the Russians have made very serious threats about that, which we'll get to in a minute. But you got to give Trump credit on one thing. Apparently, he's not working for the Russians. Look, I'll be honest. I was worried about that, and not because of the collusion in 2016 that we settled that a long, long time ago, but because him and his sons kept talking about money from Russia. He was acting so deferential to Russia, but here he is saying, I might give the Ukrainians Tomahawk missiles to strike deep inside of Russia. If you were owned by Russia, you definitely would not say that. And you would not do that, and you would not threaten that. So that seems settled now. And you have to go to where the facts are. You can't just go, okay, I don't like Trump, or I don't like Republicans, etc. Follow the facts, and they'll lead you to the right place. We're in the news business. So it's at this point, it's pretty obvious that Trump is not controlled by Russia. Am I a little surprised by that? Yeah, I am. Okay, but those are the facts on the ground. Okay, now we turn to what should we do? Well, Anna, something really strange happened when I posted about this on social media. So my account is followed by lots of different folks, bunch of MAGA, some extreme left, some normal, our viewers, who are left and independents, etc. But I'm also followed by a squadron of Israeli bots and trolls, right? So I post about, hey, it turns out Trump not owned by the Russians. Okay, I'm not sure how I feel about Tomahawk missiles, etc. Right? And they all have the same talking point. You anti-Semite. I'm like, wait, what does that have to do with Russia and Ukraine? That's already weird. But maybe they just hate me and they're like, oh, no wonder you love Russia, you anti-Semite. I'm like, no wonder I love Russia. I've told Putin to F off. We did a shirt about the, go F yourself Russian boat or whatever. You remember that? No, the Russians invaded Ukraine. I'm for peace. So I'm against the people.
I'm calling it. Man, they're so good at telling on themselves. Russia is Iran's ally.
Bingo.
A weakened Russia by dragging on, by the way, I mean, at this point, Russia wants to continue the war, so I want to be clear about it. But there was a period of time in 2022 when Russia was kind of backed into a corner because they didn't expect the fight that the Ukrainians would put up. And so they were more open in 2022 to a peace deal. But if you guys can remember, Boris Johnson met with Volodymyr Zelensky and discouraged him from engaging in a peace deal. And the main motivation for the United States and the West was, well, we want to weaken Russia. But why? Like, why do we want to weaken Russia? Like, I don't see Russia as a threat to our national security. Like, and when did we suddenly decide we're enemies with Russia? Well, is it because Russia is an ally to Iran? And if you have a strong military capability with Russia, it's going to be a little more complicated if you engage in a regime change war in Iran, right?
So Anna, no, you nailed it, because the part I was getting to is they said, of course you love Russia, you anti-Semite, and of course you love Iran.
I knew it.
I was like, Iran?
That's amazing.
What does Iran have to do with Russia and Ukraine, right? And remember, it's not just one, multiple accounts, because they all use the same talking points. Are all like, oh, you're in favor of Iran and Russia, et cetera, because they don't pay attention to the show. They're not paying attention to anything. They're just doing talking points because they're bots, right? Or trolls. So no, Israel wants to weaken Russia because Russia was helping Iran. And by the way, Syria. And with Russia distracted in Ukraine, Assad had no protection. And again, Assad's a bad guy. And I'm not in favor of Russia invading Ukraine because I don't have Israelitis, a thing I just made up, where you could only think about Israel. So for them, they're like, oh, must destroy Russia. They are helping Iran and Syria, must destroy them, right? Whereas I'm like, look, I judge things one by one. I didn't even know that Russia had anything to do with Israel. I mean, I get that they were allies with Iran and Syria, and we've talked about that on the show before, but I didn't think that necessarily affected the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and certainly not to this degree, but it appears that the Israeli lobby is driving America to stay in that war as long as possible to weaken Russia so they can't help their regional allies. And Israel did in fact topple Assad, along with Turkey, by the way. And then Turkey took parts of northern Syria, and Israel took parts of western Syria. You would know that if we had real media in this country, but our national media never talks about that, and they never talk about this alliance. And so it turns out, yes, the Israeli lobby has been driving us to stay in this war.
There are few stories that enrage me more than the laundering of Al-Qaeda in Syria right now. The warm embrace of a former Al-Qaeda leader who's now the leader of Syria as he came to the United States to be part of the UN General Assembly in New York City just recently. Like, how are people not infuriated by this? Because look, you're right. Bashar al-Assad was horrible in a lot of ways, but he was also a secular dictator, if that makes any sense. Meaning, Syria is pretty diverse in terms of religious belief, religious practices. And so part of the reason why you're seeing the internal wars breaking out within Syria between factions is due to the treatment of the Druze, due to the treatment of Christians. It's a complete and utter disaster. So the situation on the ground in Syria is unstable, to say the least. But in terms of my personal feelings about the whole matter, Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11. I don't care if you're now trying to rebrand yourself. Oh, I was an extremist Al-Qaeda member who was trying to kill Americans earlier, but I've changed my mind. I'm different now. No, I don't care. But this guy's now invited to the United States. He freaking stepped foot on US soil. It is, anyway, it makes me really angry. All right, let's move on. Now, Zelensky does plan to visit the White House this Friday. And according to the Financial Times, he and Trump will be discussing how to get Putin to the negotiating table. And in Trump's mind, threatening Russia by giving Ukraine long-range missiles, Tomahawk missiles, is what might get Putin to the negotiating table. But I don't think Putin is going to respond well to a threat like that. Ukraine, by the way, has wanted Tomahawk missiles since the beginning of the war. And the US government hasn't given it to them because, again, we're dealing with Russia, which is a nuclear power. And for reference, Tomahawks have a range of up to 1,500 miles. Long-range weapons that the Biden administration allowed Ukraine to use only had a range of 190 miles. And if the Ukrainian military had Tomahawk missiles at their disposal, they could strike, Russian territory. And here's what Trump had to say about the issue just yesterday.
They'd like to have Tomahawks. That's a step up. They'd like to have Tomahawks. We talked about that, and so we'll see. Well, I don't know. I might have to speak to Russia, to be honest with you, about Tomahawks. Do they want to have Tomahawks going in their direction? I don't think so. I think I might speak to Russia about that, in all fairness. I told that to President Zelensky because Tomahawks are a new step of aggression. I might say, look, if this war's not going to get settled, I'm going to send them Tomahawks. I may say that. The Tomahawk is an incredible weapon, a very offensive weapon. And honestly, Russia does not need that. They don't need that. Yeah, I may tell them that if the war is not settled, that we may very well do it. We may not, but we may do it. I really think that President Putin would look great if he got this settled. And I think he's going to settle it, but we're going to see. And if he doesn't, it's not going to be good for him.
Well, a spokesperson for the Kremlin stated that Tomahawks were a topic of extreme concern. And yesterday, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev wrote that it is impossible to tell the difference between a conventional Tomahawk missile and a Tomahawk missile with a nuclear warhead attached. Medvedev signaled Russia's response could be nuclear if Ukraine gets and fires Tomahawk missiles deep inside Russia. Now, obviously, that's a threat that should be taken seriously. However, a caveat or a counter argument is that since the beginning of this war, there have been multiple instances in which the Russian government has threatened using their nukes, and obviously they haven't. That being said, this isn't something to joke around about, and those threats should be taken seriously nonetheless. At least that's my take. Cenk?
Yeah, so Trump is threatening the Russians, and this is part of how he negotiates. I don't mind that so much, and he got some sort of deal in Gaza. I mean, we knew the Israelis wouldn't abide by it, but at least got the hostages back and on a road to peace. He's trying to get to peace in Ukraine and Russia. I'm worried about the Tomahawk missiles and how you can't tell if they're nukes or not. And even if you could tell, the Russians could use it as an excuse. And so, just because you're, like, for example, I see the Israeli lobby's effect on this war now, and it makes me want to get out of the war because it turns out it's just another thing we're doing for Israel. On the other hand, I have great sympathy for the Ukrainian people, and you look, Tucker said it was a Christian nation. I don't know what that has to do with anything, right? So I would have great sympathy for them no matter what kind of nation they were. And so look, with this thing of putting the Al-Qaeda guy in charge of Syria while the Russians were distracted in Ukraine, I agree with you completely, Anna. It's a disaster waiting to happen, right? So Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi were terrible guys, but deposing them led to a giant mess. It cost us trillions of dollars, thousands of men, hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians killed in Iraq and Libya. Slavery's back in Libya. In Iran, it was even worse when we did the revolution back in the 1950s, did a coup against their democratically elected government just so that our oil companies can make more money. Well, we set them on a track to be taken over by Islamic fundamentalists. And so this constant messing around with other countries, and yes, by the way, Iran, as far as I know, didn't have anything to do with Israel back in the 1950s. But did we attack Iraq partly because Israel wanted us to? Yes, Israel said they were their #1 enemy. Iraq, Saddam Hussein, as terrible as he was, used to fight against Al-Qaeda. And he would ruthlessly kill any Al-Qaeda that was inside Iraq. And Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11. Why would we want to take out the enemy of our enemy? Because they were Israel's top enemy. So we had to do it. We were forced into it. And so and where do we get our faulty intelligence on the weapons of mass destruction? Israel. So I'm sick of this. I'm sick of all American policy, especially foreign policy, being geared towards a different country. So I'm out, okay? I don't mind Trump doing this to try to get to a good peace deal, to get rescue as much land in Ukraine as possible for the Ukrainians. But then we got to wrap this up, okay?
Yeah.
I'm not fighting any more wars for Israel. That's it, I'm done with it.
And I want to be clear, look, I was very supportive of helping the Ukrainians defend themselves because at the end of the day, Russia did an invasion into a sovereign country to take territory, and that's wrong. But what frustrates me so much are the hidden motivating factors that ends up hurting everyone, including the very country that is supposed to be helped through our foreign policy, and of course that's Ukraine. But it wasn't helpful when in 2022, the West discouraged Zelensky to engage in peace negotiations. And that might have been the last time that we really had a real shot at a peaceful way of ending this war. So we'll see how this plays out, but it's-
Super last thing. So the Russians can't tell if a Tomahawk missile is armed with a nuke or not. So we're gonna risk nuclear war so that Israel can topple the Iranian government easier. Nah, no, I'm all the way out. No, let's get out of there. Let's go. No more wars for Israel, period.
From the outside, the Trump administration campaigns on exposing this cover-up, blowing the lid off this cover-up. And then they get in office, and now it seems like they're part of this cover-up.
You couldn't do a bigger Streisand effect. You couldn't come out and say, I'm more guilty than what he did. And my loyalty is to the truth. I'm actually autistic about it. I can't, even if I want Trump to succeed and the Democrats are my sworn enemy trying to put me in prison, I'm just like having to report this, that this is beyond insane.
Yeah.
And it's like Trump blowing his feet off with a 12-gauge shotgun.
All right, Alex Jones and comedian Tim Dillon got together for what they called an emergency podcast about the Epstein cover-up, during which they both criticized the Trump administration's sketchy handling of the Epstein files. Jones did his usual caveats, saying he sees no proof that Trump is implicated in the files and that he didn't actually do anything wrong. He went on a long tangent about how the Democrats likely added damaging information about Trump to the files when they were in power, which he would have no way of knowing if that's true or not. But he did go as so far as to call Trump's refusal to release the documents suicide.
He comes out the next day and says on Truth Social, no, we need the FBI to move on. I told him to do this. And the next day in a press conference, he chews out the reporter when they're talking about all these issues, saying, how dare you desecrate the graves of dead kids in Texas with the floods? Shut up. And it's uncharacteristic for Trump. He looks scared. He looks concerned. And then all the other Truth Social posts about if you ask questions, you're with the Democrats, and this is all a Democrat made up hoax, and you're just idiots. When all his surrogates had promised they'd bring this out, he talked about bringing it out. So this is harikari. This is seppuku. For those that don't know in Japanese, that means suicide. This is Trump self-harming. I don't know if Trump can course correct from this.
We're going to hear from Tim Dillon, who says he met with Vice President JD Vance last week. But first, Cenk, what is your reaction to all of this, to Alex Jones? I thought it was funny that they had to call an emergency podcasting session to discuss all of this. I don't know why Tim Dillon is dressed the way he is. What do you think?
Tim often dresses like that. I mean, I don't know the brother, but that's a very normal outfit for him. And I'm no one to talk about outfits. But look, Alex Jones is still just as crazy as he was yesterday. And in parts of that episode, he was talking about how Obama is a CIA baby. And I was like, of course he is. But weirdly, he said he's definitely born in Hawaii. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, that's because his father's actually a CIA agent and not the guy from Kenya. I'm like, all right, whatever, right? So I'm not sharing it with you guys because I think like, oh my God, Alex Jones might be onto something. No, number one important point here is look at, Alex Jones, who's very far right, and Tim Dillon, who's part of the independent podcaster group, right? They both voted for Trump, obviously, but one's independent, the other one's right wing. And they are both not letting it go, right? So that division within the MAGA movement, within the Trump voters, is still there. It hasn't gone away. The bag of squirrels that Trump threw at it hasn't worked. That's super relevant. And then I got to give Tim Dillon credit. The brother is kind of fearless. And so you might not agree with everything he says, and I don't agree with everything he says. But he's willing to say things that other people are not willing to say, and that's some of what we're going to show you here.
Oh yeah, okay. So he did have lunch or he had dinner with our Vice President JD Vance. So he revealed during this conversation that he did have dinner, and the things that were said, there was a clear disconnect between what JD Vance told him and what the rest of the administration is saying publicly, he says.
When Bondi said we have 10,000 hours of video, she said we have 10,000 hours of video. I had dinner last week with the vice president. He told me that was commercial pornography. They do not have videos of any powerful person in a compromising position. That's the party line that they're going with. If that's the case, why would Pam Bondi call it evidence? Why would she say it's evidence? She's not an idiot. She's the attorney general. Why would she say she has files on her desk if none of these implicated anybody? It just feels like they're covering something for sure, 100%. And I feel like they're telling a story, and the story doesn't make any sense.
Oh my God, I can't even focus on what was being said with Alex Jones just like blowing out that cigarette in my face. It was very awkward. Anyway, it gets even juicier. According to Dillon, JD Vance actually agrees with the critics behind the scenes. Take a look.
What I told Vance, I said, if you don't disclose everything, you're done. Nobody will support you guys. You are fully and completely part of this cover up if everything doesn't come out. I think it paralyzes their presidency completely. And
what did Vance say?
He agrees with me. He agrees with me. It really is.
Yeah, even Mike Johnson came out a week ago and said release it.
He agrees with me. The calls are coming from inside the house.
All right, well, in the past, Vance has vocally called for more transparency about the Epstein case. In 2021, he wrote this on X. He said, if you're a journalist and you're not asking questions about this case, you should be ashamed of yourself. What purpose do you even serve? In October, he said on Theo Von's podcast, we need to release the Epstein list. But now JD Vance is staying pretty quiet on the whole thing. He hasn't said a whole lot lately. He attacked the Wall Street Journal last week, though, for reporting on his relationship with Epstein. So that is an interesting development here. Cenk, it seems like between the pundits and the actual administration, and now even JD Vance and people like Mike Johnson, who are saying one thing, then changing their minds, saying something else, going back and forth. We're also seeing it on the left quite a bit. We're never going to get our hands on these files, I feel like, and I'm not happy about that. But it is becoming more obvious that there are people on both sides of the aisle, specifically within the Trump administration. And as we said in the last story, they're the ones who promised to release all these files. They're not doing it. It's very obvious now that they're protecting people who are on the list, the people who were victimizing all these girls. What do you think is going to come from this, as far not just within the MAGA movement, but with the overall Republican Party going forward?
So I like what Tim Dillon's doing, because we didn't show you this part, but he keeps saying it's Mossad and it's Israel that was behind Epstein. And so here's the two reasons why I like that. Number one, I think it's the most likely answer, but I'm guessing, we're all guessing, right? So if we found out definitively that it was just the CIA and Mossad had nothing to do with it, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I wouldn't be like, oh my God, that's shocking. No, not shocking, right? If we found out no intelligence agencies were involved, but Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Bill Gates, and a bunch of other super rich, powerful people were involved, and that's why they were covering it. Again, I wouldn't be overly surprised, right? But it's one of those three options. And so mainstream media goes, no, it's none of those options. The government said that it was, that there were no clients, and that everything else is a conspiracy theory. Well, if you believe that, honestly, you're not very bright, right? So so the hundreds of girls, I mean, as we keep saying, because it's so absurd, it's so over the top, the hundreds of girls raped themselves. But come on. I mean, you want to talk about insulting our intelligence? It's forget the government, mainstream media that calls other things conspiracy theories. No, brother, the conspiracy theory is that the girls did it to themselves. That's the lunatic conspiracy theory. And if you were a real reporter, that's what you would write. But instead of all the reporters like, you better not talk about Mossad. You know, that's crazy. Ben Smith the other day flipping out, it's not Mossad. Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro, we gotta move on. The more they panic, whenever Israel's mentioned, I move it up another notch and another notch and another notch as most likely, okay? We're judging it from the outside, not because we have some sort of secret evidence from the inside. I would never claim that, right? But based on the context clues that they're throwing out here. So that's number one reason why I like what Dylan's saying. The second reason is, if it's not Israel, and Israel feels like they're being accused, they have enough power to get their files released. So we'll have the answer either way. Like if we never get the answer, then it was Israel. If it's not Israel, we'll get the answer. Because Israel will be like, people are blaming me. No, that's it. Anti-Semites, release the files right away. Good, then I'd be on your side. Okay, so, but interestingly, not a single Israeli supporter has been like, release the files. They're all, and by the way, let me correct that. That's actually not true, okay? I oversimplified there. I mean, prominent Israeli supporters in the media like Levin and Shapiro. There are plenty of people who support Israel that are normal human beings, both on the right and the left, and I've seen it. I'm not just saying it, I've seen them say, yeah, release the Epstein files, 100%, right? So, well, you know why? Because Mossad didn't call them and say, like just CIA didn't call us and go, oh, we're doing a secret conspiracy, right? That's why I find it so strange that Levin and Shapiro in particular, they both say that they talked to Israeli officials, and then they both come out and say, we gotta move on from the Epstein files. Those two are very questionable. Everybody else is just reacting without enough information. Anyways, now look, I like the podcasters overall, not because they are on our side. They seem to be leaning right. They supported Trump. I'm against all that, but at least they're having real conversations. When you, like, a human conversation hasn't broken out on cable news in decades. So it's all talking points and consultants and, hey, Mr. Pundit, what do you think about populism? Well, you know, all my clients that have given me millions of dollars tell me that this is what we think about populism. Oh, shut up, right? And at least they're having real conversations. And you know what's interesting is they, in a sense, they didn't live through the first Trump administration. They were alive, but they weren't on the air. Some of them were like Rogan, right? That's why, in a sense, you could say they're a little bit more culpable. Like, brother, you saw a billion lies from Trump the first time around. But for guys like Tim Dillon, Theo Von, Andrew Schultz, et cetera, they, to my knowledge, I'm sorry if I got it wrong, but they weren't on the air where they're covering it day to day. Like Trump said, what? Trump said who? Yeah. Like, you serious? So they started during the Biden era, and Biden's talking about how his uncle is being eaten by cannibals. So they think, oh my God, these Democrats are huge liars. I'm going to the right, right? And then the right gets in and they're like, whoa, that's a nuclear level of lying I didn't expect. Yeah, they should have expected it, but they didn't. And so at least guys like Tim Dillon are being honest enough to call it out.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really interesting perspective as far as like how they really just weren't on air. So it's hard to understand how much of what is happening, not just within the last 4 or 5 years, but within the last 10 years, or even within the last 20 years that they were paying attention to with this level of intensity. Not for nothing, we have a lot more access to our public leaders and politicians now than we did before. But that said, I was in junior high and high school during the second George W. Bush administration, and that was when I like politically turned on. And it wasn't necessarily because of the president and what was happening with Iraq and everything like that, but it was because all of a sudden these things that were happening in the world, they were impacting my life, and we were just more aware of it. So that's why I never really understand when people say they're not political, because it's like, what kind of life do you live where this stuff doesn't touch you? But it is interesting, and I kind of go back and forth with the idea that, it's good to have your talking points kind of like thought through at the very least versus, people just reacting to things. Because I feel like whenever you just react to something, it's helpful to think before you speak generally, right? But we get a lot of reactionary content these days. And sometimes I do feel like, sometimes that's why we have people who say one thing and then the next day they're like, actually, I feel like it's this. And more power to them. I would much rather them do that than just like leave it out there. But at the same time, people like Tim Dillon and Andrew Schultz, he was never my favorite, even before he got political. I never found him funny or interesting. But now these people, they have voices that regular everyday people are listening to, and they're being touted as beacons of normalcy in a media ecosystem that really hasn't given much thought or attention to normalcy in the first place.
Yeah. So last thing I'll say is that, well, twofold. Wolf Blitzer will make anyone else look normal. So if you compare people to people on cable news, yeah, they'll all look human. And finally, about the porn tapes that they mentioned, the so-called porn tapes. Like we said earlier in the show. So you had tens of thousands of hours of tape on Epstein, what you thought were Epstein clients. That's why Trump and his entire team said it in his first term. When Biden was in office, no one disputed that they had tapes on actual clients, Democrat or Republican. But now, for the first time since 2006, when they got some of the tapes, they've looked at it and go, oh, it was porn all along. None of you thought to look before. That's your story and you're going with it. And then they wonder why we think the government is lying to us.
This is the most self-destructive temper tantrum stuff, and is the equivalent of going off the coast of San Diego and just for a day throwing rotten chicken blood into the ocean. Great white sharks will show up probably in a few hours.
Today, Alex Jones stated that President Donald Trump is engaging in a self-destructive temper tantrum over the backlash toward the administration for refusing to release the Epstein files. And he had a lot more criticism of Trump where that came from. Jake, I'm gonna just immediately toss to you because enjoy your victory lap. Go ahead.
Yeah, no guys, look, so this is really important. It isn't about we were right and literally every other, not literally, and not every, but most other left-wing hosts that told you they'll never turn, they'll all agree 100% with Trump on everything, they're a cult, etc. Or yeah, they were wrong. They could move the goalposts. Oh, they're not saying slay queen to Kamala Harris, so it doesn't count. Okay, whatever. You could do whatever you want. You could. That's not. But that for you guys out there that aren't in this silly media games and stuff, we need to win over independent voters. We're not going to win over Alex Jones. You crazy? Okay, but the fact that Alex Jones is saying no, Trump is wrong, and I'm mad at him, etc. And we're not a cult. It gets people thinking independently. Once you get, and Alex Jones fans are the least likely to be converted, right? But especially for the independents that are the closest to us, that voted for Obama before, that voted for Bernie before. If you get them looking at each issue and going, yeah, you're right, I actually agree with you on that, or I don't agree on that. And then at the end of the day, they're gonna see, wait, you guys, the left is the populist left, not the establishment Democrats, not the corporate guys, but like, yeah, we do agree with you on anti-war and anti-corruption. Oh, you guys have been saying it all along. We do agree with you on paid family leave and higher wages and lower drug prices. So focus on what's important. But yes, this break within the Trump ecosystem is massively important because it gets people thinking, and you want them thinking, and you want them looking around so that they could find the populist left. And if they don't like it, no problem. But okay, but at least we've got to get that option in front of them, and this helps tremendously.
Now, Alex Jones is hitting Trump. Look, it's super noticeable because, as we all know, Jones has been very reluctant to criticize Trump publicly. There have been some previous examples, but certainly nothing as overt and aggressive as what we're seeing today. Now, in previous days, he has theorized that Trump is not releasing the Epstein files in order to save the stock market, while also accusing the Democrats of fabricating the contents of the Epstein files. So look, we still have a lot of issues with Alex Jones here, but let's take a look at more of what he had to say.
Trump believes, and it's probably true, that if it comes out a bunch of head bankers and politicians and leaders and business leaders are in this, which we know they were, that will crash the stock market. That will just destroy America's image in the world. And so it's so horrible that they made the decision not to bring it out. After years of saying they will release the Epstein file or list, suddenly they're not going to, and we're told it doesn't exist. But then Trump comes out last night and says, well, it does exist, but the Democrats had control of it, manipulated it, which is actually true. They've had control, but they would destroy anything they didn't want in there and leave what they wanted in there. I didn't even think about the fact. I'm like, oh yeah, if they've had the list and they've had the files for years, the Democrats would take stuff out, destroy it. Well, that's obvious. They would leave in and twist and put in what they wanted.
Okay, not a total nonsense. And by the way, it would hurt the reputation of America in the international community if it was outed that a bunch of our bankers are disgusting pedophiles that our government has been providing cover for. First of all, I've got news for everyone in America, okay? The international community does not perceive us in a positive way at all, at all. We are aiding and abetting a genocide right now as we speak, okay? Even if the Security Council in the United Nations overwhelmingly votes in favor of sanctioning Israel or doing something to stop the genocide in Gaza, the US comes in and boom, vetoes it right away. We are not perceived in a positive light in the international community as it is. And I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn about, let's protect the rapists and the disgusting pedophiles because we're worried about the stock market. The stock market will be all right? It always rebounds. But we need to find out who among us, who in positions of power are disgusting predators that shouldn't be in those positions of power. They should be in a prison cell.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jake.
And two things about that. I mean, look at who the real populists are, right? So here we are saying, no quarter given to Epstein clients, okay? Whereas Alex Jones, that by the way, that was a day or two ago, saying, well, maybe Trump is right to give them comfort and aid and hide them. So not so populist after all, right? So now on this show, I don't know that anybody's ever criticized Alex Jones more than we have on this show, right? And what he did at Sandy Hook is unconscionable and unforgivable among so many other conspiracy theories that were total junk. But this is not a conspiracy theory. 80% of Americans agree on this. The real conspiracy is that the government is right, that the girls raped themselves and there were no clients, right? So, but the second important thing is, you saw Alex Jones there a day or two ago scrambling to find an excuse for Trump. But as you'll see today, he's saying, nope, I gave him a layup on that and he still wouldn't take it. So now the break is even worse than it was before.
So apparently some of the comments that Trump has been making recently in regard to his own base have basically been the final straw for Alex Jones. Now, he says that it was the last straw, and let's watch Alex Jones accuse Trump of treating his supporters like a cult.
Your statements about, you people that bring this up don't even deserve to be involved in this movement. You are excommunicata. You are You are henceforth ex cathedra from the mouth of the God King. You are expelled from the church of the holy golden toad, Donald John Trump. Well, I was never in the church of the holy golden toad. I was never in a cult. I never said MAGA was a cult. I said a lot of people want it to be a cult. If you start saying I'll excommunicate people, well, you're not allowed, even unless it's a cult, to say to people, you either agree with everything I do and don't question things, or you're not in our club. I don't want you. Well, that kind of sounds like a thoroughbred cult to me.
Yeah, and look, to be quite frank, it was a cult in Trump's first term. But Trump managed to cobble together a pretty fragile coalition in his second term. And those people aren't buying his BS, and they're not going to be bullied into dropping something that they obviously care deeply about. And by the way, one more video before I go to you, Cenk, because Jones also admitted that members of Trump's orbit are actively trying to make him drop the story.
I don't want power. I don't want to be in tuxedos at Mar-a-Lago. I don't want to be at the White House. I've already been invited. I had the White House calling me this morning. That's a whole nother thing. Bunch of big heavy hitters calling. And, you know, it's like, what do you want, Alex? How can we make you happy? And I'm like, can Trump please stop destroying himself and us with him? Well, yeah, he does what he thinks is best. Streisand effect, yeah, we know. Yeah, you know, don't you? You know I'm right.
Damn. So there's Alex Jones publicly admitting that members of Trump's administration are hitting him up and basically trying to trade favors so Alex Jones drops the story. And I guess to his credit, I mean, clearly he's not dropping it. So Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's because his own audience is livid. Because if he dropped the story, then he'd be right next to Trump in the sellout line, right? So, so the vote, remember what we always said, blame the politicians, you wanna blame media figures, that makes a lot of sense. And you want to, so that's why when sometimes people beat up on us, that's okay. We're in the game, right? But don't beat up on the voters, because those same voters are now even pushing Alex Jones to, you better not support Trump on this issue, right? And that's huge. I watched the whole thing, and that whole excuse that Alex Jones had set up earlier with, oh yeah, why don't you just say the Democrats destroyed the files, right? Which is, by the way, he's not wrong about. He's wrong that that's what happened. He's obviously making it up ex post facto, right? But he's not wrong that that would have been the right excuse, the right lie, right? But so Alex Jones serves it up on a silver platter to Trump, and Trump's like, no, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say that they're non-existent and fake, and anyone who asked for it, like all of my voters, are terrible people and
stupid.
Is stupid and disloyal, right? Okay, poll out today, Anna. 79% of all Americans say release the Epstein files. 83% of Republicans, larger than the national average, say release the Epstein files. Is Donald Trump involved in a cover-up? An astounding 59% of his own voters say yes. Wow. I mean, come on, guys. If you thought they were never gonna break with him, can I get a tiny bit of honesty without moving goalposts? So,
in fact, let me add to that, Cenk, because our member Sutton writes in and says the conservative subreddit is livid over this. There is no daylight between the American people on this issue, which is why I keep repeatedly making the point that the Epstein files really isn't a partisan issue. Anyone who's trying to make it a partisan issue is a hack. The American people, meaning ordinary people, in my opinion, I know that there's gonna be disagreement, but I don't care. I think most people are good people, they're kind people. And when they see an injustice, like with what happened in this whole Epstein debacle, they want answers. And I think this is a perfect example of how most Americans are in line when it comes to justice, fairness, rule of law. So we'll see what happens, but I don't think that people are going to drop this in Trump's base.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why Alex Jones today, I mean, if you watch the whole thing, he goes off and says, "You're not the Pope, bro." Okay, so there's obvious massive. It's like going over from rebellion to almost revolution against Trump within his own base here. But you made a great point, Anna. In order to win the popular vote, Trump needed a larger coalition, a larger tent. And when you have a larger tent, it's more likely to break apart because the guys on the one end, like I saw somebody on social media today, is like, I voted for Trump, but before that I voted for Obama. He's like, I'm open. I just voted for Trump because he was less establishment. This proves he is the establishment. He's the elites. So who's next? That's what you want. You want to bring that guy back. The coalition is so large in order to win the popular vote that those independent voters are not at all like the radical right going, oh yeah, I'll get her, Alcatraz and all that stuff. Don't lump them in together. It's both factually incorrect and strategically incorrect. Now, I mean, look at what Alex Jones said there. Trump was the Pope of the Church of the Holy Golden Toad. I don't even know what that means, but it doesn't sound good. Okay, so I hear the toads are gay because of the water or something. So I mean that can't be good. So now finally, so the people who thought that all of MAGA was a cult, and if you're among the voters that thought that on the left and you're on the Democrats, I don't blame you guys. The reason I don't blame you is because they were. In the first term, whatever Trump said, they would just blindly follow. And we were all ripping our hair out. And I'm like, can I get a little bit of daylight, etc. But this is what I've been trying to get through to people. Because back then, it was just Fox News and Rush Limbaugh. It was an assembly line of talking points. And they didn't get any diversity. Now they got diversity all over the place. Larger tent. It includes Rogan. It includes Theo Von. It includes guys like Andrew Schultz who are lifelong Democrats. So when you have a tent that large and filled with independent media, even though they might lean right and really frustrate us on issues, Trump's not their uncle. It's not Fox News. It's a different media. It's a different voting base. We have to open our eyes to that so that we can react in a way that makes sense instead of driving them away by categorizing them as all of them as the most radical right and yelling at them and accusing them or making fun of them. Ha, you guys were wrong with Trump. Why don't you invite them in, at least the ones that agree with us, not the ones that don't agree with us, and go, hey, you know what? You wanted populism. Good news, we've got populism. And it's real, it's not fake. I mean, if an ally of mine is in the White House and they don't release the Epstein files immediately, I will be livid and turn on them instantly, okay? There's no, and if they don't do all the things that we ask for, anti-war, anti-corruption, etc. No quarter given. Real populism, real honesty. That's what the American voters want. You give that to them, and you're gonna win a comfortable majority.
Well, this is the thing. I know a lot of people in town and others who have, like a Ukrainian guy, been here 20-something years. His kids are all born here, already in college. He's being deported. I mean, I know a bunch of people in Austin, Hispanic, you name it, who like have kids here that are 25 years old. They've been deported. I mean, you don't want to deport people that are non-citizens because they're protesting Israel, but people that have been here 20 years and have a big business and have a bunch of kids here and are contributing, I don't care if they're brown or white, I think they have a right, I think Trump should get a better, I mean, they're trying so hard to get people and impress everybody because the base wants it, that they are just grabbing a lot of people that should be last on the list, if at all, because the bad people are hiding.
All right, the bad people are hiding, he said. That was Alex Jones speaking with Nick Fuentes about Trump's deportation policy, and he seems to be echoing the sentiment of a lot of Americans, left or right, that the way the Trump administration is going about executing these deportations is unconstitutional. So in the clip, Fuentes is upset because he thinks the Trump deportation numbers should be way higher than they are, but he does not agree with Jones's assertion that these illegal immigrants are hiding. He says, just go to where they work, the construction sites and the farms, you'll find them. That's how you get them out of here. So Jones did say that Trump's efforts to deport American citizens to El Salvador was both dangerous and unconstitutional, something I think most people certainly agree with. Take a look.
I think It's way more dangerous. Trump saying we're looking to deporting citizens to El Salvador. Now that's unconstitutional, and that is really bad.
I agree with that.
Of course, he is referring to Trump saying he wants to start sending homegrown criminals to El Salvador, i.e. American citizens, which is not what anyone, not even Trump's most diehard MAGA supporters, ever asked for. But while these deportations have drawn both Democratic and Republican ire across the country, the Trump administration is not letting up. Just this week, a memo was obtained by USA Today, issued by Attorney General Pam Bondi on March 14th, ordering ICE officials to enter homes without warrants in their search for illegal immigrants to deport. So now not only are we arresting and deporting people without due process, we're not even obtaining warrants for these arrests. In the memo, ICE agents were given permission to flout the quote unquote proactive procedures to obtain warrants because they will not always be realistic or effective in swiftly identifying and removing alien enemies. The memo read, given the dynamic nature of enforcement operations, officers in the field are authorized to apprehend aliens upon a reasonable belief that the alien meets all 4 requirements to be validated as an alien enemy. It added, this authority includes entering an alien enemy's residence to make an alien enemy's act apprehension where circumstances render it impracticable to first obtain a signed notice and warrant of apprehension and removal. On March 15th, the very next day, Trump announced that he would be invoking the Alien Enemies Act, even though the act doesn't really apply to this current situation because we are not at war with any nation. This was also the day that 200 Venezuelans were deported to El Salvador, including the wrongfully deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia, whose story we have covered extensively on this show. So what's sad about this story, like the Alex Jones of it all, not necessarily the story itself, is that I don't want to be perceived as celebrating Alex Jones for saying something that everyone should already know and understand, something that really everyone should just agree on a factual basis. It is factually unconstitutional to carry out deportations the way the Trump administration has chosen to do so. That Alex Jones said that out loud and it's headline worthy is a testament to the fact that so many of us just don't live in the real world anymore. People are constantly being gaslit by their chosen media figures and influencers to the point that when these pundits and influencers actually say something factual, something that shouldn't be considered remarkable or noteworthy, we have to celebrate it. But the flip side of that, Cenk, is that when we have someone like Alex Jones saying these things to his specific audience, it does feel like a victory because you know that the people who watch that show aren't the same people watching this show. So we can't reach them with this message, but for whatever reason, they're over there listening to Alex Jones. So Cenk, what do you make of this story specifically? What it says about the world that we live in, where the emperor just has no clothes. He never had any.
Yeah, and that comes from a guy who made shirtless videos, so it's kind of appropriate. That's Alex Jones. We did make fun of that in the past. All right, look, I got no interest in Nick Fuentes and Alex Jones, but it's a sign of the times. It's a sign of how crazy Trump has become that even Alex Jones is like, whoa, bro, whoa. Take it easy. That's nuts, right? So, and he's not saying it on wrong ground, saying unbelievably, he's saying it on right ground here. So, but break down further what they alluded to in those clips, right? So first, there's the thing that everybody agrees on: sending U.S. citizens to El Salvador. What are you, nuts? No, it's so obviously unconstitutional. It's not even worth considering. And in fact, the only defense that I've seen that MAGA have of that insanity is, well, I've seen 2. One is, well, what if they were really bad? That's not how the Constitution works. What if they were really bad, right? And the other one is, oh no, he's just trolling. No, he won't. No, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Even though he has said twice on air in the White House, yeah, I'd like to send homegrown criminals to that dungeon in El Salvador. So when you've lost Alex Jones on that, I don't know that there's anyone left. Is there anyone to the right of Alex Jones? So I don't know, Roger Stone. Is there like Can you find 7 people in the country who go with Trump on that? I'm not sure you can. But what was interesting is that it was broader than that, mentioning how critics of Israel are being rounded up. I'm not surprised Fuentes says that. He's got a lot of issues on that issue, so I don't want to give Fuentes any credit for any of that, right? But Alex Jones being concerned about that, I'm not sure that I would have imagined that he'd be concerned about that, but apparently he is. And then if you notice, he said people that have been here a long time, Alex Jones did, and then they're getting rounded up, and that's because the others are hiding. That's his excuse, right? But basically what Jones was saying there is, I know a lot of people in Austin who are getting rounded up who shouldn't be rounded up. Oh, when it's the people all of a sudden you begin to realize, hey, this is what oppression looks like. And for all the right wingers who were worried about and warned about tyranny in government, well, here it is, brothers and sisters. And you open the doors for it. But it's okay, I'm not in the crowd that says, oh, you open the doors for it, so it's all your fault and I hate you, etc. No, it doesn't matter. What matters is, what do we do going forward? And enough of us have to unite around the fact that the Constitution matters, our rights matter, and you can't trample upon them, to send Americans abroad, to arrest anyone who disagrees with Israel, a foreign country, to do all of these abuses. Earlier in the show, we talked about how he's now wants to use the military inside America, the insane talk about running for a 3rd term that's unconstitutional. No, I had a sense that a good number of online shows on the right and independents would push back against that, and they did. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them did. But if you had asked me, would Alex Jones be among them? I would have said, no way, no way. Alex Jones will agree to any abuse of power that Trump says. And it turns out I was wrong. Even Alex Jones saying, no, you shouldn't abuse the Constitution like this. If you're crazier than Alex Jones, you might be crazy. So that's why we showed you the poll earlier in the show. 52% of Americans now say that Trump wants to be a dictator who destroys our democracy. That is a stunning number. These guys turning on Trump is stunning. So now we find out, will Donald Trump listen to anyone? Will he turn around and stop this abuse of the Constitution and our rights? Or is he gonna dig in further and lose the whole country? That's what we're all gonna find out together.
That's the thing that stood out to me too, is now that he's pulling from his own personal experience, now that he knows people who are actually affected by these Trump policies, he feels some type of way about them, to the point that he is finally speaking out against them. But I just wanna say, I don't wanna give Alex Jones too much credit here. Credit where it's due, but he's still a Trump supporter. He's still for this deportation policy overall. And he's still a conspiracy theorist, because on the show, he was like, they're just rounding up the wrong illegal immigrants, but they're out there, they're just in hiding, which I thought was a funny spin on the story. Funny, relatively speaking. It's just so Alex Jones to be like, they're out there and they're in hiding, and we still need to be worried and scared of these people. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, super last thing is, nobody's giving Alex Jones credit for anything. What we're saying is, it's amazing that he's even lost Alex Jones on this issue. That's all. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.